Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Iccm 2021. Hope you have enjoyed a delicious meal. Now, let me invite the next keynote speaker, Professor A. Parasuraman, to deliver his keynote address. So Professor A. Parasuraman is an emeritus professor and holder of the James W. McLemore Chair in Marketing at the School of Business, University of Miami, United States of America. He is also the chairperson of AIM Parasuraman Center for Service Excellence at Jagdish Sheth School of Management, India. Professor Parasuraman is widely known for his work on ServQual, ESQual, and the Technology Readiness Index. He earned his bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from IIT Madras and MBA in marketing from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He then proceeded to the United States, where he gained a doctorate in business administration from Indiana University. He was selected as one of the 10 most influential figures in quality in 1988 by the editorial board of the Quality Review, co-published by the American Quality Foundation and the American Society for Quality Control. He received the Academy of Marketing Sciences Outstanding Marketing Educator Award in 2001 and was designated as a Distinguished Fellow of the Academy in 2004. He has also been named to the Chartered Institute of Marketing's Guru Gallery, which profiles the 50 leading marketing thinkers worldwide. Professor Parasuraman has published over 130 articles in scholarly journals and has served as the editor of the Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science from 1997 to 2000 and the Journal of Service Research from 2005 to 2009. He has authored several books, consulted with many companies, and conducted several executive seminars on service quality, customer satisfaction, and the role of technology in service delivery across the globe. Before inviting Professor Parasuraman to deliver his address, I would like to share an experience of ours. We, the Department of Marketing, the staff of the Department of Marketing, had the golden opportunity to meet Professor Parasuraman at a conference held in Kingsbury Hotel in 2017. So he is a very humble, simple, and an example which we had as we had the lively conversation with him in Tamil. So ladies and gentlemen, let us invite our pride, Professor Parasuraman, to deliver his keynote speak. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. Vanakkam, ellarkum, romba vanakkam. So it's my pleasure to be part of your ICCM 2021 conference. The title for my keynote address is the Sustainability Service Quality Framework, Implications for Researchers and Practitioners. And I am particularly pleased because the theme of the conference, ICCM 2021, happens to be issues and challenges related to sustainability. And as many of you know, my own research over the past 4+ decades has focused on quality of service. So in the last couple of years, I've been toying with the idea of somehow linking sustainability to service quality. And I have some thoughts that I will share with you today in that regard. And the forum that your conference affords me to share some of those thoughts with you is extremely pleasing to me. So I'm going to, since I have only about 40 minutes or so, I'm going to be fairly quick with some of the slides. So please bear with me. So let me first start with the sustainability part. A brief overview of sustainability and what is popularly now known as donut economics. And I will say more about this a little bit later. But basically, sustainability is a macro level construct in the sense that usually it relates to countries and populations and people and society and so forth. And in combing through the literature, there aren't any standard definitions of sustainability. But a common theme that cuts across different definitions is that sustainability has to do with conserving resources so that what we enjoy today as societies will also be available for future generations to enjoy, to fulfill their own needs. And the underlying support for this whole notion of sustainability at the societal macro level are actually three interconnected pillars, as they are called. You see them on the picture on the left-hand side here. The three interconnected pillars of sustainability are the environment, society, and the economy. Now, in the business domain, not much work has been done on sustainability. Some recent research is starting to emerge, which is a very, very welcome thing. But within the business domain, some of you may have heard of the so-called triple bottom line. The triple bottom line has to do with profit. Businesses have usually been focused much more on profit than on other things. But now, in addition to profits, businesses are also focused on people who are both employees and customers, as well as businesses are starting to think more about the planet. So in other words, the idea here is that the three major pillars of the macro level sustainability concept, which are environment, society, and the economy, also have an analogous support system within the business domain in the form of the triple bottom line, the planet, people, profit type of focus that more and more businesses are tending towards. And on the right-hand side of this chart, of course, you cannot read any of this, but I'm sure most of you are familiar with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals for 2030. And those are summarized here. The basic point I want to make here is that the SDGs, the 17 SDGs of the United Nations, are actually supported by these three pillars of sustainability. So with that as background about sustainability, I would like to show you a brief video. It's just about a minute and a half that introduces this whole notion of donut economics. So let me stop sharing my screen so that the tech team there can actually show the video, and then I will come back. So tech team, please take over.
In the 20th century, economics lost its purpose and started chasing the false goal of GDP growth. In recent decades, that has pushed many societies into deepening inequality, and it's pushing us all towards ecological collapse. This century calls for a new goal, meeting the needs of all within the means of the planet. In other words, it's time to get into the donut, the sweet spot for humanity. But that's no easy task. Today, billions of people still fall short of their daily needs, from food, housing and energy to healthcare and education. And yet collectively, we've already overshot our pressure on some of Earth's most critical life support systems, driving climate change and the breakdown of biodiversity. What we do to this Earth in the next 50 years will shape the next 10,000. So let's replace that last century goal of endless growth with the goal of thriving in balance. And if we're to have half a chance of getting there, what economic mindset would be fit for the task?
Okay, thank you for playing that. So this whole notion of donut economics has been propagated by a fairly young economist from the UK. Her name is Kate Raworth, and it's a very interesting idea, as you saw in that brief video clip. Basically, let me share my screen again. So basically, the idea is very, very simple and yet complex, but you know, the visual presentation of the idea is very simple. Basically, what Kate Raworth and other economists have been arguing is that for society to survive and thrive in the coming years, it needs to operate in the so-called sweet spot, as the video referred to it. So this is actually the donut. The donut is the green part, and it has two boundaries, as you can see here. At the lower level, you have the social foundation. These are like the minimum requirements in terms of food, health, water, security, education, and so forth, that humanity, societies need to survive properly. So that is kind of like the lower boundary of this donut. But then on the other hand, there is also an ecological ceiling, which is the upper boundary of the donut. And this is where, you know, overconsumption, overintelligence of societies and so forth can lead to things such as climate change, which you're all aware of, ocean acidification, and so on. So the idea here is that society should try and move towards the donut and be within the donut. Not fall below the lower boundary, nor exceed the upper boundary. So this is the basic idea behind the macro level donut economics type of concept. Now, switching from the brief introduction to sustainability, let me also briefly overview a couple of different major frameworks that I've developed over the years. Many of you are aware of the so-called GAPS model of service quality. Along with that, there's also the SERQUAL scale that has been developed to measure quality of service. So I will again briefly touch on these two ideas, and then I will conclude my address by bringing the two sustainability and service quality together in a common framework. So here is a summary version of the so-called GAPS model of service quality. On the left-hand side of this framework, you have the customer's perspective. And basically, the model says that when customers evaluate quality of service, they compare what they receive from a particular company or an organization by way of service with what they believe an excellent company should be able to deliver. And typically there is a gap. There is a gap between what customers expect from excellent companies and what they actually believe that they're receiving from any given company. So that is what is labeled here as gap 5. And my research shows that there are 4 major internal service organizational gaps that in turn contribute to this gap 5. The gaps are all labeled here. The first gap is the market information gap, which, as you can see, is the disconnect between customers' expectations, what customers actually want, and what the organization or the company thinks customers want. The service standards gap, gap 2, is the gap between what the organization understands correctly or incorrectly expectations to be, and what standards or guidelines the company has. The third gap is a service performance gap, which has to do with whatever standards or guidelines that may be in place within an organization and whether or not the organization's people and systems are able to deliver to the organization's own internal standards. And then the last gap is the internal communication gap that has to do with the gap between what gets promised to customers through external communications, typically through marketing departments, and what actually gets delivered through the organization's operations department, typically. So there are internal disconnects between silos that exist within different organizations. So the basic idea behind the GAPS model is that to truly improve quality of service externally for customers, gaps 1, 2, 3, and 4 internally within the organization needs to be closed so that gap 5 will also close. Now, I don't have time to discuss these gaps in great detail, but let me just spend a couple of minutes to talk about this market information gap, because the market information gap to this day is a major disconnect in many firms. It's a major deficiency in many firms. So to kind of illustrate this gap, let me share with you an experience that I had just a couple of years ago at the Sahara Star Hotel. Some of you might have heard of this hotel. This is a hotel just outside of Mumbai International Airport in India. So I had occasion to stay there. And when I checked into the room, everything was looking very good, as a 4-star, 5-star hotel should look like. But in addition to all of the tangible things that I could notice in the room, one particular gadget that attracted my attention, and I took a picture of this, which you see here, is this control panel. As you can see, there are a number of different buttons that you can push. This is a bedside electronic control panel from which the customer or the guests of the hotel could control all of the different functions in the room, electronic functions, curtains opening and closing functions, the time functions, the temperature function, the fan, and so on. So a number of different controls are there. Now, my first reaction upon seeing this electronic control panel was, wow, this is really great. I was actually pleasantly surprised to see something like this. But pretty soon I realized that just to understand the different buttons on the control, it was going to take some work. In fact, I had to play with the different buttons to see, which button was controlling what type of function within the room. But being a mechanical engineer in training, I'm kind of enamored by these gadgets. So I spent about 15-20 minutes, and I thought I understood all of the different controls. Then I went out for a series of meetings and came back very late, almost midnight. And then I was getting ready to sleep, got into bed. I thought I could use the electronic control panel to shut off all the lights in the room. So as I started shutting lights off, maybe I was too tired and I wasn't pushing the right buttons. I noticed that I had no clue which button I was pushing or what function was being performed by this so-called sophisticated electronic control panel. Some of the lights I was able to turn off, but there was this bathroom light that I could not get to turn off. I will push one button and suddenly the curtains will start opening. Push another button, suddenly some mood lighting will start coming up. So this was actually getting to be quite irritating to me as a customer. So then I thought, well, let me get out of bed and actually go to the bathroom and switch off the light manually. But the problem is I couldn't find any manual switch. Again, maybe I was too tired, it was hidden somewhere, but I could not find it. The only way I could, at least that's what I thought, only way I could turn off the light in the bathroom was to walk back to the bed and try to do it from the control panel. So everything needs to be controlled from the panel. So I could not do that. So I actually went again to the door and shut the bathroom door, went to the bathroom and shut the bathroom door. And again, some light was coming from the bottom of the door and entering the room. So I resorted to a very, very low tech solution where I took a towel and, placed the towel across the crack at the bottom of the door to block the light. So this is my personal experience with this. Now, why am I sharing this? Now, if you think about this experience, the hotel, with all good intentions, put in this device thinking that this will be a way to delight customers, that customers would actually be blown away by a device like this because they can control everything from the side of the bed. But on the other hand, if you look at customers' expectations, I would argue that most customers probably would not have had an expectation like this, to have a device like this. So there is, at least implied in here, some sort of a disconnect between the customer's expectations and what the company thought those expectations were to this device. And also, if you think about resources needed to put in a feature like this in every hotel room, is going to be a very expensive proposition. I'm sure the hotel spent a lot of resources installing these electronic, bedside control panels. And we can also start talking about sustainability. I would say because of this gap one, there are a lot of resources that are being wasted, in many organizations, trying to sort of wow the customer, trying to blow the customer away with bells and whistles that are not really part of the core expectations of customers. So isn't this a wasteful practice? And if this is a wasteful type of practice, then what does it do to sustainability? So already we can see some links with sustainability. Similarly, from a societal well-being standpoint, if you kind of translate that to individual well-being as a customer, it created a lot of frustration for me. A lot of times, service quality shortfalls that occur because of these internal gaps within companies are very frustrating for customers. So there are some implications for personal well-being, and of course for profitability also for companies. I'm kind of relating this to the P bottom line. It affects the planet because resources are being wasted. It affects people because customers can get frustrated, and it also affects profits because it takes away from the bottom line, so to speak, of a company's profits, because these are expensive propositions. So building on that idea, this picture sort of visually captures the notion that if you look at the left-hand side, it's a condensed version of the gaps model. So you have gap 5 at the middle and gaps 1, 2, 3, and 4 that contribute to gap 5. So within an individual organization, if there are these different gaps present, then that will have a negative impact on the triple bottom line. So on the right-hand side, you have the triple bottom line, the people, profit, and planet. They are all interconnected. So the internal service gaps will adversely affect at least one of the P's, and which will ultimately affect the other P's as well, because the 3 P's are interconnected. Okay, next, a few words about this CircWall methodology, or the CircWall approach for measuring gap 5. CircWall is a measure of the external gap, service quality gap experienced by customers. And again, as many of you know, CircWall consists of 5 dimensions: reliability, responsiveness, assurance, empathy, and tangibles. And one of the key findings that I've consistently found in my research on quality of service using the CircWall methodology is that reliability which has to do with consistently delivering the promised or expected service accurately and dependably, is the most critical dimension. In fact, when we ask customers to allocate a total of 100 points across the 5 dimensions in terms of the relative importance of the 5 dimensions, we typically get about 1/3 of the allocation. 1/3 of the allocation goes to reliability, and the rest are spread among the other 4 dimensions. And ironically, the least allocation goes to tangibles. This doesn't mean that tangibles are unimportant. It just means that in many companies, there may be a lopsided focus on visible, tangible things at the expense of some of these more important dimensions. Again, going back to my Sahara Star Hotel experience, I would say that the visual aspects of my hotel experience were very, very good, extremely good. But I had problems with respect to these other less visible, less tangible types of dimensions. So here again, we are seeing that even today, many companies are probably not using the limited resources that they have in a wise or in an optimal fashion, which of course has implications for sustainability. A related concept that relates to this cirque-wall approach is that we have done a lot of additional research on this whole notion of customers' expectations, because customers' expectations are really the standards against which service quality gets judged by the customers, against which customers actually measure their satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the service. And one of the key findings of this additional research that we have done on customer expectations is that when we talk about customer expectations, they don't always exist at the highest possible level, contrary to what many companies think. Customers are quite reasonable, at least that's what our research shows, and their expectations actually span a range going from an upper boundary, which you're calling desired service. Desired service is the level of service that customers believe can and should be delivered by an excellent company. And then at the lower boundary, we have what we are labeling as adequate service, which is the minimum level of service that customers are willing to accept. So this whole notion of zone of tolerance says that companies really don't have to jump through hoops and provide all kinds of bells and whistles to create a good customer service impression on customers. As long as the actual delivered service falls somewhere within the zone of tolerance, most customers are likely to be satisfied. Now, this again has implications for sustainability. Do we always have to go overboard to please customers? What this suggests is that you don't necessarily have to do that. All you have to do is make sure that you fall somewhere within the zone. And building on that idea, let's move on to the next slide, where on the left-hand side, we have the zone of tolerance, and the right-hand side, the blue box denotes the range of satisfaction that customers are likely to get. And and then the horizontal double-headed arrow here refers to the perceived performance level. The perceived performance level refers to the customer's own assessment of the level of service that they are receiving. So as you can see, as long as the perceived performance level is within the zone of tolerance, the customer satisfaction is also going to be within the zone of acceptability, so to speak, satisfaction, acceptability for the customer. If the perceived performance level falls below the lower boundary of the zone of tolerance, then customers are going to be disgusted. If the perceived performance level falls above the zone of tolerance, then customers are likely to be delighted. And in fact, many companies are trying to delight customers these days. Customer delight is an often mentioned concept in many companies. Now you can already see that the zone of tolerance has some parallels to the donut that we talked about with respect to the macro level sustainability aspects that we saw earlier in my talk. I should also mention that there is some literature on how companies can actually effectively manage expectations and exceed expectations. Again, I don't have time to discuss it in detail, but very briefly, managing expectations has to do with keeping customers' expectations under control, keeping customers' expectations within the zone of tolerance. So the expectations are, controlled, then they are much easier to satisfy than if the expectations go out of control. So what are some of the things that companies can do to prevent customer expectations from rising too much? One is to, be reliable. Do the things that you asked, that you said you would do, and do it reliably. Place a premium on reliability. So if you don't make mistakes, then customers' expectations aren't likely to go up. So if you constantly make mistakes, don't do what you promise, which is the second box here, ensure that your promises reflect reality. Don't overpromise is really what we are saying. And then the third component here is communicate with customers, stay in touch with customers, explain what's going on, and so on. So all of these three strategies that you see here on the top part of the diagram relate to managing customer expectations, keeping that zone of tolerance, expectations within that zone of tolerance, and actually expanding the zone of tolerance. Because if the zone of tolerance is expanded, then you have more room to try and satisfy customers, right? And then once you manage expectations, there's also a lot of discussion in the literature, including in this book, that talks about exceeding expectations. Now, in terms of what we've already talked about with respect to sustainability, I would argue today that we really need to rethink to what extent do we really need to delight customers? Do we really need to delight customers all the time? Do we really need to exceed the desired level of service all the time? One of the problems there, particularly from a sustainability perspective, is that, delighting customers and exceeding expectations all the time is not going to be sustainable. It's not going to be sustainable because, again, one simple argument that could be made is that once you use certain things like bells and whistles to delight customers, then over a period of time, those bells and whistles actually become minimum expectations. So how long are you going to be able to continue to provide those kinds of delightful experiences? Anyway, what I'm saying here is that the strategy and tactics for exceeding expectations, that is delighting customers, need to be re-examined in light of these sustainability concerns. In fact, here I would like to just quickly refer to one article that was just published that has to do with customer delight, actually. And one of the key arguments that myself and my co-authors are making in this article is that there are multiple pathways for delighting customers. You don't always have to provide fancy gadgets or really out of this world type of experiences to satisfy to delight customers. Customer delight is a much broader concept than always wowing the customer with bells and whistles. Even sometimes doing the simple things consistently, correctly, can actually be delightful experience, can actually be a very pleasant experience for customers. So anyway, so if you're interested in this, you can look up this article. It was published just a couple of months ago in the Journal of Service Management. So let me now move on to a more closer linkage between the so-called donut economics and the zone of tolerance notion that we talked about. So as we saw, the zone of tolerance is a range of customers' expectations bounded by the desired service level at the top and the adequate service level at the bottom. So if you superimpose that with the cirque wall approach, so analogous to the donut type of idea, I've created this notion of pentagons. You can call this a pentagon, right? It's a five-sided figure. You have the five dimensions of quality of service, and each of those dimensions have a certain zone of tolerance. So this is just a visual way of representing the zone of tolerance in a visual mode, in this pentagon type of mode that is analogous to the donut, the circular donut concept in the sustainability domain that we saw earlier. So moving on to the last part of my talk, let's now try and see in a more formal sense the linkage between donut economics and cirque wall and the gaps model. This is what I'm calling the sustainability service quality framework. So on the left-hand side, just focus. If you focus on the left-hand side, as we said at the outset, we are looking at a macro level analysis of sustainability at the societal and planetary level. So here we have the donut. Interestingly, if you look at the donut carefully, I mean, this is just a abstract picture of the donut, but there's a lot of literature on donut economics. So if you look at the more detailed pictures, you'll see that virtually all of the SDGs and the attributes related to SDGs are captured in that donut. If you move on, if you move from the macro level sustainability perspective to the micro level company customer perspective, then the analogous concept here is this zone of tolerance pentagon. So you have a donut here, you have a pentagon here, and the key aspects of the pentagon are actually the gap 5 and the 4 internal gaps that contribute to it. As long as you have those 4 internal gaps, you have an external gap, as we saw earlier, and then external gap can occur on one or more of these 5 cirque wall dimensions. So let me move on. These are the last couple of slides that I have. Let me move on to some thoughts on possible research directions that academics can pursue, and also practitioners should be thinking about some of these issues and questions as well. Researchers and practitioners need to address issues such as the following. Should a company exceed the desired level, the outer boundary of the zone of tolerance? In other words, is there even any benefit to invest resources and invest human capital and so on to exceed the desired service level? The preliminary work that I've done in the whole area of customer delight, which are mentioned in that article that I referred to a couple of slides back, suggests that not necessarily so. There are multiple pathways to delighting customers, so you don't necessarily have to do that. But anyway, more research needs to be done on that. Should we delight? And if so, how? Which is question number 2. If we should delight customers, under what conditions and for which dimensions should we do it? So that again is a research issue that needs to be think about, that companies need to think about. For example, the Sahara Star example, they were trying to delight the customer on the tangible aspects mostly, but with this electronic control panel that visually is very appealing because it kind of connects all of the different gadgets, all of the different controls into one nice bedside control panel. So it's very fancy looking, but in terms of being able to operate it properly and the customer frustration if they are not able to operate it properly, is not very good from a customer well-being standpoint, from a customer satisfaction standpoint. So there are a lot of inefficiencies, I should say, in many companies when it comes to delighting customers today. What are the effective ways for lowering the desired service level? For example, we saw on the previous slide, a couple of slides ago, some strategies for managing expectations. Part of managing expectations is to see if the desired service level can be lowered. If the desired service level can be lowered, and simultaneously, if you also lower the minimum expectations, then you're expanding the zone of tolerance, and you're also making your strategies and tactics to exceed customer expectations or falling within the zone a little less difficult, easier. So there's more work that needs to be done. Are there potential downsides to lowering the desired service level? Again, that's something that needs to be discussed, researched and discussed. Researchers and practitioners should also look at possibly modifying the zone of tolerance for each dimension, taking into account the dimension's importance as well as sustainability concerns. For example, here we are seeing the same pentagon, but if you notice, the zone of tolerance, at least visually here, for the different dimensions. First of all, the different dimensions are here shown by color-coded here. Reliability is this green one, purple one is responsiveness, the blue one is tangibles, this is empathy, and this is assurance, right? So pictorially, I'm trying to show here, for example, reliability, which is the most important dimension. Reliability, which is the most important dimension, should necessarily have a narrower zone of tolerance. There's not much room for error because customers really want companies to be reliable. But on the other hand, one can anticipate that in the customer's perspective, in the customer's mind, the zone of tolerance for tangibles is likely to be much wider because that's not as critical a dimension. So the point I'm trying to make here is that what are some ways in which companies can judiciously alter the zone of tolerance through their communication strategies and other strategies so as to use their limited resources much more efficiently? Can service quality be improved without necessarily increasing the resources needed to do so? My answer is a rhetorical question. My answer is yes. For example, in the Sahara Star Hotel example case, I would say, instead of investing a lot of resources into putting in this sophisticated control panel, why don't you use those resources to train your employees better? Why don't you use those resources to have systems in place to help employees provide better service, better training, and better resources for frontline staff, for example? So you can reallocate resources and improve the overall customer experience without always having to add resources. What sustainability-related benefits can be obtained by closing the 4 internal gaps and in the gaps model of service quality? So here, the question I'm posing here is that what are more formal ways in which we can connect some of the service quality concepts to the more general sustainability concepts? In other words, I'm saying that, specifically focusing on the SDGs, I think researchers have a golden opportunity here to look at in what ways can the SDGs be enhanced or achievement of SDGs can be helped by focusing more on quality of service that customers in particular and people in general receive from different organizations. So with that, let me stop and thank you for your patience. I think I've just about used up my 40 minutes for this talk. So I will stop here and let the organizers take over. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your wonderful keynote speech on service quality and its models and how it related to sustainability development, micro and macro level. Thank you very much, sir.
You're most welcome.
The next event is the keynote speech by Professor Gary Dessler. For that, let me invite Tasika Yoheshwaran, lecturer, Department of Human Resource Management, to introduce Professor Gary Dessler.
Very good afternoon to you all. Good morning, sir. In this moment of Iccm 2021, task of introducing our keynote speaker, Professor Gary Dessler, who is a business educator, administrator, consultant, corporate director, and an author, is a great privilege to me. I'm so pleased to introduce our living legend in human resource management as a keynote speaker today. Professor Gary Dessler obtained his Bachelor of Science degree from New York University in 1966, Master of Science degree from Rensselaer's Polytechnic Institute in 1967, then the Doctor of Philosophy degree, City University of New York in 1973. Professor Gary Dessler, as a founding professor at Florida International University, served for many years in its College of Business, teaching courses in human resource management, strategic management, and general management. He contributes a lot on his textbooks writing and research, consultations, giving lectures, seminars, and courses in all around the world on modern human resource management practices, maintaining positive employee relations, employee engagement, strategic management, leadership development, and talent management. Rather, my words, his books are speaking a lot. As you all aware, that readers in worldwide use Gary Dessler's Human Resource Management, Fundamentals of Human Resource Management, and the Framework of Human Resource Management in total more than 10 languages in international editions, including Russian, Spanish, French, Arabic, Thai, Greek, and Chinese. He has published so many articles on employee commitment, leadership, supervision, quality improvement, and human resource management practices in the journal, including Academy of Management Executive, Advanced Management Journal, Personal Journal in Human Resource Management, and International Journal of Service Management. Despite all the hardships comes from the COVID-19, in this moment of Iccm will be recorded in the history of University of Jaffna. So please, audience, I request keep your mind open and be free to listen his words of wisdom. And thank you very much, sir, for being with us. It's a great time for us to live with your words. And that's all together. We all welcome to our conference. And this forum is yours. Over to you. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for that invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Let's see. I want to make sure, does everybody hear what I'm saying? Is everything working properly? Hello?
Yes, sir. We can.
Okay, that's fine. If we could put the first slide up. Well, I've been asked to give say a couple of words today about the subject of issues and challenges of sustainable development for human resource managers, and that's what I would like to do. The main point I wanted to make is that this year, the human resource manager worldwide, the priority in 1920-21 was generally to deal with the pandemic's effects. On the other hand, however, it's absolutely essential that HR managers understand that they also face the ongoing challenge of also crafting their longer term HR strategies to help build competitive, productive, sustainable businesses. As an example, the World Bank's country director for Sri Lanka said recently that businesses should play an important role in helping the government to mitigate the pandemic's social and economic consequences, and in helping to protect and ensure the well-being of their societies and other stakeholders while supporting their strategic goals. In the short run, as we've all experienced, HR's immediate human resource management's immediate pandemic-related priorities have included developing policies and procedures for addressing problems such as providing personal protective equipment and COVID-19 safety practices, social distances, mental health and well-being, and managing remote work and employee communication and telecommunication systems. In 1920 in particular, that consumed an enormous part of most HR managers' time. And as we get into 1921, as we are, it's going to be important to increasingly focus on their strategic challenges. I want to again paraphrase the World Bank's Sri Lanka director. He said the priority this past year has been to weather the immediate crisis while laying a strong foundation to be able to move ahead with building competitive, productive, sustainable, and resilient businesses within their societies. So for human resource managers, the big challenge during the period is not only to address these short-term challenges, as for organizing remote learning, but to also translate societal and corporate goals into actionable human resource practices, which is the same as saying that human resource managers have got to master strategic human resource management. Let me say a word about what strategic human resource management strategy is. Strategic human resource management, I would define as consisting of three components. Number one, formulating and executing human resource policies and practices. Number two, that produce the employee competencies and behaviors the company needs. Number three, to achieve its strategic goals. So strategic human resource management, just to review quickly again, to repeat, means formulating and executing human resource management policies and practices that produce the employee competencies and behaviors the company needs to achieve its strategic goals. The government of Sri Lanka has adopted all or part of 17 Sustainable Development Goals. These goals include, for example, no poverty, zero hunger, health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water, decent work, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities, responsible consumption, and climate action, and decent work. In turn, each one of those sustainable goals, if you go to statistics.gov.lk, each one of those sustainable development goals has a number of sub-goals or indicators that businesses can use to operationalize how they're going to pursue those goals. From business's point of view, you could ask, why are these societal goals important to businesses? And the answer is that for a variety of reasons, including the fact that societies tend to translate these societal goals into laws. Companies adopt these societal goals as their own and bake them into their organizational strategies. HR then plays a role in achieving those goals. So the sustainable goals are translated through laws and various other methods into business goals, and the business goals then become part of the strategies of the organizations, and the human resource manager's role and challenge during this period is therefore to continue to formulate policies and procedures that allow their departments and their companies to pursue these societal sustainable development goals. In other words, again, as I said before, HR policies and practices produce the employee behaviors that are needed to achieve the company's strategic goals. I could give you an example of how they might do that. For the Sustainable Development Goal of gender equality, one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals adopted by Sri Lanka, for the Sustainable Development Goal of gender equality is sustainable, ensure a woman's full and effective participation and equal opportunities. So again, each one of these 17 Sustainable Development Goals have got subsidiary indicators or sub-goals that can be used by businesses to operationalize and pursue the goal. And one of the sub-goals for gender equality is ensure a woman's full and effective participation and equal opportunities. In order to help his or her business pursue that goal, the HR manager will then formulate human resource policies and practices that produce the employee behaviors that'll enable the company to move toward achieving that target. In recruitment, for example, he would formulate policies and practices that emphasize recruiting women, identify gaps in recruitment and retention of women, and implement a plan, an action plan to attract more female applicants. he or his department could formulate workforce flexibility policies to help employees juggle conflicting work-life challenges. They could implement formal mentoring programs to help identify and develop those who seek, women who seek higher roles. So again, there are a number of steps, policies and practices that the human resource manager should formulate in order to ensure that their organization is on track to help develop the women necessary to achieve society's greater sustainability goal in terms of gender equality. I give one more example. For the sustainable development goal, decent work and economic development. One target for the sustainability goal, decent work and economic growth, is protect labor rights and promote safe and secure working environments. Again, employers should play a major role in achieving labor rights and employee safety targets. With respect to employee safety, for instance, the HR manager would institutionalize the company's commitment to worker safety with a broad and explicit safety policy. They'd make sure that top management is illustrating their commitment to worker safety. They'll publicize the worker safety policy. They'll give safety matters high priority, in part by emphasizing top management's commitment to employee safety. The main point I want to make, again, in conclusion, is that the HR manager's priority in 1920-21 was often to deal with the pandemic's effects. For example, by instituting remote communication programs and telecommunication and teleworking. At the same time, the enormous challenge for human resource managers at any time, but particularly now, given the pressure of these immediate challenges, is the challenge of also crafting longer-term HR strategies that help build competitive, productive, sustainable businesses within their society. Those were the main words I wanted to say. I want to thank everybody for being here and for the invitation. And it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand it over to the host at this point.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your deep knowledge about the challenges facing HR managers with us. Your session was full of enthusiasm and full of valuable knowledge. I hope everyone here and virtually have gained a lot of knowledge and interesting facts from you. Thank you so much, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, now let's listen to Ms. Sankita Menon, Publishing Relationship Manager, the Emerald Publications. So may I kindly... Ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the inconvenience caused. Now let's have the tea break so you can refresh yourselves and come back by 3:55 p.m. So we hope to see you all here by 3:55. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to ICCM 2021. Now let's listen to Ms. Sankita Menon, Publishing Relationship Manager from Emerald Publications. So may I kindly invite Mrs. Jacinda Nirojan, lecturer attached to Department of Human Resource Management, to introduce Ms. Sankita Menon to the audience. Thank you.
Madam Sangeeta Menon is Publishing Relationship Manager at Emerald Publishing, where she leads the publishing programs for India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Maldives, and Bhutan. Prior to joining this Emerald, she worked for the leading publishers like Taylor & Francis as an editor for South Asia, Elsevier as a publisher in South Asia, and Wiley as publishing manager. In her 15 years of experience in this publishing industry, she has worked at creating the opportunities for research from South Asia to become a part of the global research platform through the various publications formats. She continues to support the authors and editors through the training and informative sessions that will guide them in making better publishing choices for themselves. More than that, thank you very much, ma'am, for becoming an academic partner of ICCM 2021. This is over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and a warm welcome to everyone. Thank you all for joining in. My introduction has already been given, and I think it ties in with the topic that I'm going to be discussing today. So without wasting much time, let me get on to it. I hope my screen is visible to everyone. I'll take that as a yes. Okay, great. So, like the introduction said, I'm responsible for India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Maldives. And there are common challenges when it comes to public we need to address, because in terms of it's not just about the quality of research that we're talking about. Our biggest challenge is the communication of the research itself. And some of the tips that I hope to share with you and some of the points that I'm going to be discussing in my presentation is to address that issue. Now, naturally, in the short time span that we have, I will not be able to explain everything, but hopefully you'll take away some important points from this. At the end of the session, if time permits, maybe we can take some questions. But if not, worry not. I have put my email ID at the very end of this presentation. You can always write to me, reach out to me. And hopefully I'll be able to address your questions through that. So just to begin, we are talking about publishing articles with international publishers. So now I represent Emerald Publishing. So a lot of my examples will come from Emerald Publishing. To understand that all your major publishing houses are aligned to your Committee of Publication Ethics, which means that our processes are very, very similar throughout. So all these examples that I'm giving you is applicable to all the publishing houses that you're familiar with. So before I begin, there's some facts that we need to keep in mind. One is approximately 225,000 researchers join the research community each year, which means there is a big challenge every year rising when it comes to publishing your papers, because the researcher community is all are journals. And there are some advantages, disadvantages based on where researchers are based, the kind of institutes they're coming from, the kind of support that they're getting. Hopefully this presentation will help you close some of those gaps. Second is that nearly 45% of the articles are returned to authors without even reaching the editor-in-chief. So this point I mentioned because this is the very first step. And small casual errors that happen from the author's side is what causes this return of articles. So this is not a rejection. These are instances where small issues like the corresponding author has not been defined, has not been identified, the keywords are not enough, or there are too many keywords given beyond what the journal has expected. So those missing information means that the article will go back to the author for complete information or clarity before it can even reach the editor-in-chief. This becomes important to mention because this process can delay publication by at least 2 weeks. And as a researcher, your main aim should be to get published as quickly as possible. So you want to eliminate instances that can cause delays, any errors from your side that could actually hinder your own progress. Third, out of the 55% that actually reach the editor-in-chief, between 30 and 50% of those papers don't even reach the peer review stage. So the belief is that your challenge is to get your paper published, but I'll say your first hurdle comes at this stage. So when it comes to selecting papers to go into peer review, your editor is spending about 15 to 20 minutes per paper to decide whether he or she should proceed any further on it or not. And you can take care of to ensure that the editor is able to go past, is able to make that decision quickly and get back to you is what we are going to be discussing. Third is over 60% of the articles that are published in high impact journals do not contribute to the impact factor. Now, this fact becomes important because when you are publishing a paper, you're putting in a paper that you're putting a lot of effort into. So when a paper is published in any journal, it should actually be working for you. And that's where that's where the deciding factor on which journal to publish in really matters. Because based on where you're publishing, that article gets visibility, starts getting you the kind of citation. Factors start coming into play. So when it comes to high impact factor journals, for instance, they're highly regarded. And for the right reason, they have very high quality. But when it comes to early career researchers, where your focus has to be on getting published in as many good journals as possible, as many as Scopus index journals as possible, high impact journals may not be the right choice for you because the timeline it takes to decide on the papers and also the high probability of rejection. So when it comes to high impact factor journals, we usually advise or we feel that this is a much better place for those years of experience, have ample number of papers and can afford to wait and go through the process that an high impact journal has. So understanding the outcome of the publishing platform, outlet that you've chosen is an important factor. So let's go over the publishing process itself. So the desk review, which is the first stage that I mentioned, this is where the submissions go to actually a person within the publishing house, where they'd see for certain elements. They'll see whether the author names have been provided, has the corresponding author been identified. If the journal is asking for 5 keywords, has that been provided? Is the abstract within the word limit? Small factors like that. So based on that, the paper either goes to the editor or is returned to the author for clarification. If the paper goes to the editor, the next stage is where the reviewers are invited, and that process takes at least a week or 2. This is based on the availability of reviewers, how many agree subject expert or not. All these factors come into play here. Then the paper goes under review for 6 to 8 weeks. So while we have systems to ensure, we follow up with reviewers to get them to come back to us with relevant review comments, this takes about 6 to 8 weeks is what we give them. Then based on the reviewer's comments, the editor makes a decision that can take up to 2 weeks. So based on this process, you can see that the ideal time from submission to review feedback is about 3 to 4 months. And once accepted, papers, which means that the entire process from submission to publication without any delays, if it goes on track, then it takes about 7 months, 6 to 7 months. But those who have published will know that this is often not the case. There are a lot of factors, not just on the editor or publisher side, but also sometimes small factors like the author not coming back with the review corrections in time can also cause delays. So what are the top reasons for rejections? I think the most common problem that we see is not following instructions, which is the author guidelines. Now, it seems very logical, for people to ask, why do we have to follow author guidelines, which are different for every journal? So within Emerald, for instance, you'll have 2 journals which are in the same subject line, but either of them have to change the entire format of your paper. So which means that every time a paper is rejected, you're forced to reformat it and submit it into another journal, and it doesn't matter if the journal. Now, there's a reason for that. And that's something that not many researchers understand or have known. And the thing is, as per the Publishing Committee of Publication Ethics, you're supposed to submit your paper to only one journal at a time to avoid overlapping, to avoid the situation where the same paper is published by 2 different journals. The entire process of publication takes time, effort, and is an expensive journey. So having such situations is not ideal. Secondly, not when such instances happen, when a person submits to more than one journal, they are also taking away the opportunity of another researcher in the process. So to avoid those kind of situations, the first thing we do is we expect the authors to follow the author guidelines when it comes to formatting. So the minute you see, when an editor sees that a paper has been submitted which does not follow the journal's format, it's usually a red flag for them that there's a very high possibility that the paper has been submitted to another journal at the same time. So they reject it irrespective of the topic. And to give you an example, one of our Emerald authors had actually prepared a paper and submitted it to an Elsevier journal. And decided to use the Emerald's format of structured abstract. Unfortunately, the minute that paper reached the Elsevier editor, he rejected it, saying that this paper has been submitted to an Elsevier journal. It is not true. And even when the author wrote and confirmed that it has not been submitted anywhere, the paper still got rejected. So this is our first line of defense against malpractices when it comes to publishing. Second is when the paper is inappropriate to the journal scope. It is very surprising that a large number of people, researchers, still don't read the aims and scope before submitting the paper. And this is a very common error that we see when it comes to submissions that we get from South Asia region. And that you can have 10 journals in marketing does not mean that there are 10 different outlets for publishing a paper on marketing. There has to be journals, which is how they set themselves apart from the competitors. And the journal aim and scope is what defines what kind of papers the journal is going to take. Unfortunately, a lot of early career researchers don't bother to go through this, and they actually lose a lot of valuable time just because they have submitted their paper to an incorrect or wrong journal. Third is your problem with quality, or in terms of inappropriate methodology. It's not rigorous, reasonably rigorous research that has been done. So when it comes to research publication itself, happened over the decades, over the years. So it's not about how much content a publisher can publish or what a journal would take, but we are talking about real impact of research. And by real impact, I mean that what is your paper contributing to in the subject? How is it a kind of paper that can influence policymakers, or can it be something that helps the industry? So it has to be contributing to the society or to the subject in some manner. And that is what the editors are looking for. That's what the publishers are working for. So we see a lot of problems with quality. And like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to South Asia, our biggest challenge is not but sometimes we don't even express it correctly. So those issues can lead to rejection. And finally, like I mentioned, we are talking about real impact, which means that the paper may be well written, sufficient contribution to the field. So your paper can get rejected on that basis as well. So when it comes to choosing the right journal, your journal selection has to be like an investment decision. So once a paper is prepared, you have to take a step back and spend time in choosing the right journals for your paper. And I mean journals in plural, because ideally you should have up to 5 journals ready as a list for your paper. So the minute you receive a rejection for any reason for your paper, you are able to resubmit in some other journal. So that decision is help you get published quicker. So a good choice can actually enhance your work and your reputation. And that's what the importance of finding the right journal is. The outcome of the paper has to be long lasting, seeing that how much time and effort goes into preparing a single paper. So the factors that you want to consider are what kind of readership the journal has, what kind of articles it has been publishing, what is the internationality of it, what is the likelihood of acceptance, circulation, for instance, local versus a global publisher, the time from submission to publication. So there are tips on how you can identify all these factors and then decide which journals actually suit you the best. Then whether it's a practice paper, research paper, review, or viewpoint. And that's where, like I mentioned earlier, going through the aims and scope of the journal becomes very important to know whether you your paper to that journal or not. And in case you have open access mandate, you can publish open access in any Embryl journal. We have most of our journals are hybrid open access, which means it gives you the choice of either going for green open access and publishing for free, in which case it remains behind a paywall. The other option is you can pay to make the access available openly. We also have platinum open access journals. Your South Asia Journal of Marketing from Sri Lanka is an example of that, where the journal is sponsored by the you can publish for free. There is no APC, there are no charges at any point of publication. And if your paper is accepted into the journal, it enjoys the benefits of open access. Finally, measuring the quality. So when it comes to measuring the quality of a journal, there is just one factor that you want to look into. If rankings are important, they are those rankings that you want to look into, indexing where all it has been indexed. Then in South Asia, the focus is on Scopus. Is the journal indexed in Scopus? All these factors need to be looked into, but also beyond that is the usage of the journal and the peer perception. And peer perception, actually, I've seen plays a very strong. I've seen, journals that have very strong hold in the community, and they may not be Scopus indexed, but they are researchers who are very happy to publish there. And so you need to see what your priorities are when it comes to selecting the journal. So citations are not a complete guidance on what works, what is a quality measure for a journal. Another thing is that when it comes to indexing and ranking, be very clear about what are which are the indexing agencies that matter and which are the fake ones, because it is very easy for predatory journals to fool researchers by using terms like impact factor or 4 point something, whereas we only look at your JCR rankings, which is by Clarivate's analytics, which is what gives you authentic impact factor ratings. Investigate on the indexing and abstracting information of a journal to decide whether this is the right journal for you. So some of the resources that can help you identify journals is journalguide.com or your journal suggester or finder. So this is not going to be the solution for finding your ideal journals. This only makes the journey a little easier. So instead of going through 200 journals, you will get a list of say 20 journals, but the work of actually reading the aims and scope, seeing what kind of editorial board it has, articles, that still falls on you as the author of the article. Third is the reference list. I think pre-internet era, this was one of the best ways to write journals in many ways. And the fact is that if you are using a journal in your reference list, then possibly your readership is also going to be there. So they can be your first choice of where to approach. And finally is the publisher's website itself, which actually gives the details of the journals, and you can read and then decide which one is the right one for you. So we have advanced search settings these days that can help you really get specific in terms of what journals are available in which match your research topic. So so when it comes to editors and reviewers, these are the things that they're looking for. The first one is originality. So what's new about the subject, treatment, or the paper is. If it is something that seems repetitive, even if it's a well-written article, it will get rejected. Another thing is in terms of what kind of articles the journal has published, it's always good to investigate a little before submission by just going through the list of table of content, for instance, to see what kind of articles or topics they have covered in the recent past or where they tend to be heading. So that will give you an idea about what are the trending topics as well. Second is relevance to and the extension of existing knowledge. So how is it contributing to subject is what we are looking at. What kind of possibilities arise from that publication. Third is your research methodology. Are your conclusions valid and objective? This I will more detail because again, we see a lot of errors here where the authors do not realize the errors they make when they're describing the research and actually end up hurting their own publication chances. Then is clarity, structure, and quality of writing. Does it communicate well? So here we are not just talking about typos and general errors that we see in publication. This is about the communication of the research idea itself. So just to give you an example, like in academic publishing, there's only been one instance where an editor called me up and said, Sangeeta, I received a paper from Malaysia. And I think a researcher has written on a topic that I'm really interested in, but I'm not sure. So when I went through the paper, I could see there were so many errors. Naturally, English was not this researcher's first language. So it needed clarity. So I worked with the author, requested him to get it edited a few times. And it took 3 attempts to reach that amount of clarity where the editor was confident that this is exactly what he was looking for and he was able to accept that publication. And this does not happen very often because editors do not spend too much time. So here we are talking about, because even after the 3rd attempt on clarifying this, the English that was used for the paper wasn't the best. It needed further editing, and that is the take care of at a later stage also. But the idea is, does your editor understand what your research is all about? So that form of communication clarity is necessary. Then is the sound logical progression of argument, how well the paper is presented. And you have to think this in terms of the reader. What is their experience? Would they be able to understand your paper? Because at the end of the day, your research paper makes you the expert of that your topic, but the reader is reading it for the first time and trying to understand that. So your paper has logical progression in the way it is presented. Then is the theoretical and practical implications, the so what factors. Again, we are talking about real impact here. So we have this paper could be contributing further. Then is the recency and relevance of references. So this might surprise a lot of researchers that when it comes to deciding on what papers to put into peer review process or not, the factors that the elements that an editor would be looking at is the titling, the keywords, the abstract, and then the references. And references become important here because when they see that an article written in 2021 is giving references of something that was published in 2000, early 2000s, it is a red flag. It does not mean rejection. It just means that they will want to see, investigate further whether those references actually need, is it referring to an old study and adding on to that, and that's how it makes it relevant? Or is it something that the researcher has used to fluff up the reference list? So this automatically becomes a red flag because old references could mean that the research is not new and their paper may not have much to contribute. Then is the internationality and global focus. Because we are talking about international journals, the topic has to be such that it will also appeal to the audiences outside. A simple study could have taken place in, say, a small city in India. Let's take Jalandhar as an example, but it has no relevance to a reader out. To make it relatable to the global audience. So you may not have to change the topic, but you may have to change the way it connects to a much bigger issue that can attract the attention of your international audience. Then is the adherence to editorial scope and objectives of the journal. So a lot of articles get rejected just because it does not meet the editorial scope. And last is, of course, a good title, keyword, and a well-written abstract. Like I mentioned, these are also elements that an editor is looking at to decide whether the paper should go into. And these elements are also extremely important because if you visit any journal page, you'll see that the elements that are visible to a reader are based on which they will decide whether they want to read the rest of the research paper or not. That's what makes it, these elements are what contribute to high citations and downloads at the end of the day. So when it comes to structuring your paper, like I said, you have to think in terms of how are you putting your arguments or your research paper in a logical flow. And for that, we always suggest that you should start from preparing your figures, tables, and theory, which is your data or your proposition, follow results and discussion, then the conclusion and introduction, and your last and final elements that you work on are the title and abstract. So when it comes to introduction, open any journal that you like or a Scopus Index journal and have a look at the introduction section. Your very strong introduction section should be answering a few of these questions that I have mentioned on the screen. One is, what is the problem? Are there any existing solutions? Which one is the best? What is the main limitation? And what do you hope to achieve? So your introduction should ideally be using these questions as references. What you may want to consider is quoting from some previous research. If you're adding something new to an existing research, then you can mention it. You can use work to cite here. Self-citing can be allowed, but only if it is relevant. Any work that is not yours has to be referenced. And if you're using your own previously published work, then it may be referenced. When it comes to methods, always indicate the main methods that were used. Now, this seems like a very basic instruction, but this is also one of the most common errors that we see that happen when researchers are writing. Because when a paper is written, you have to, like I said, you have to think in terms of what the reader is experiencing. So when it comes to making choice of what methods you have used, you have to understand that the reader will want to understand why you chose those particular methods. So that clarification should follow at some point so that you're able to focus on why you use a particular method over the others and what are the factors that help you make that decision. Then is demonstrating that the methodology was robust and then focus on telling the main story. Explain what are the main stages of your research, the method that influenced your approach, and why you chose this particular samples, etc. Again, you have to think in terms of what the reader is going to understand from your paper. Other challenge that we see is that when researchers give too much information. So additional details can always be given in the appendices. So keep it as crisp and clear as possible. When it comes to results, your results should only focus on the essentials. What are the main facts? What are the main results? When it comes to every other detail, another thing that you want to, if you wish to include, those should be again be included in the appendix. Necessary. You only focus on what are the significant facts that are emerging. When it comes to discussion, what you want to consider adding here is, do you want to provide interpretation for each of your results presented? Are your results consistent with what other investigators have reported? If there are any differences, why do you think there are? Are there any limitations that you face that you want to explain here? Or you feel that there's a limitation to the current research and something could be done at a future time? You might want to discuss that here. Does the discussion logically lead to conclusions is what, again, you want to see whether that chain of flow be. So do not make statements that go beyond what the results can support or introduce new terms or ideas at this point of time. So what we see is that bias sometimes that researchers have, where they're very clear about what the result is going to be like, and they might make statements that actually, contradict what the results are, or they could be. So the investigation has not been done and the claims are being made. So you don't want to do that. Or, in terms of introducing a new paper or new idea, they introduce new terms or ideas at this point of time, which is again, you do not wish to do because if to a reader that can be confusing. So keep it again as crisp as possible. Again, seeing how logic flowing your previous methodology part and whether it leads to your conclusion section that is to follow. So when it comes to conclusion, the most common error we see is conclusion section to make the paper concise and express it here. So summarizing the paper is not the right thing to do for the conclusion section, and you have to use the abstract section for that. So what you want to include in conclusions are providing global and specific ideas about the conclusion, indicating what are the uses and extension. The original questions that you had posed in the introduction section, they can be answered here. Any limitations that you see, you can mention it here, or state the implications for further research at this point. Do not summarize the paper here. The abstract is exactly for that purpose. You don't want to start any new topic or introduce new material. You do not want to make obvious statements because they would be able to arrive at that themselves. And do not contradict yourself. Again, like I mentioned, chances of unconscious bias is high, so you want to check yourself for that. The reason why I put keywords later is because when it comes to today's time, when we're talking about digital world where we are accessing everything online, your keywords play a very essential role. Your keywords, your abstract and title actually are the three elements, like I mentioned, that determine how much citations it can get, how many downloads your, only because we are using search engine optimization when it comes to our papers, whatever is being published with us. So having strong keywords is a very important aspect. So one, in terms of what are the strong keywords that or key phrases that you are likely to use if you're searching for an article like yours. So a simple thing like search can make a difference between using the word HIV versus using the word AIDS. So what kind of what term are you likely to use that can become one of your guiding factors? Then look at the keywords of articles relevant to your manuscript. Do they give good results? So you can check just on Google, what kind of results are likely to come up, what kind of articles are coming up when you use the keywords. Again, this is at a stage when your paper is ready and you want to see what words are occurring over and over again in your paper. When jargons, again, the term is likely to be used outside. Is it something that is used within your geographical region? Is it something that is more widely known? And using the keywords in very essential for the visibility and search, improving the search of your article. So one of the tips when it comes to preparing the title, and that's using the keywords that I can share with you, is use your keywords to describe your title itself. So because keywords are the words that are repeated constantly during your in your paper, that's how you're identifying the keywords in your for your paper. Use those keyword or key phrases to prepare your title. So a good title should actually contain about less than 12 words, be describing the content perfectly. So the phrase that it should be a phrase that introduces the paper and catches the reader's eye. The keywords should identify the focus of the word. Like a place where your keywords you can play with your keywords and see which actually sits in better to prepare a good strong title for your paper. So when it comes to your work, like I mentioned, at the time when the paper is accepted into a journal, we do have editing and proofreading services that are there as a part of the process. But the challenge is not about the grammar. It is about making sure that the communication is happening properly, which is why when it comes to submitting your paper, make that to ensure that you are providing a paper where grammar is being taken care of, spellings and punctuations are correct, the flow and transition or the sense problems are taken, typos or typographical errors are taken care of, your mathematical or statistical content should be accurate, your references need to be complete and accurate, ensure that you're consistently using the same phrase throughout your manuscript. If you are aware of the common errors that you make, must take care of that. So many people use spell check, but of course we know that it is not always complete and you'll still need to go through the spell checks suggestions also to know whether the changes need to be made or not. Then it's always better to ask someone else to have a look at it because errors, so we are so used to our own language, sometimes it helps to have a fresh pair of eyes. If you're able to avail editing services prior to submission, So within publishing houses, we do provide author services. All global publishers do. And the advantage of such services is that your manuscript remains safe. That is the biggest advantage these services have over local editing services. Secondly, because we process so many papers, so many of our authors process their papers through these services, we are able to tie up with such services like we have with Editage, for instance, at a much editing is much superior to a local publisher. And again, we believe in customizing those needs. So it only depends on, completely depends on the author on what they wish to choose. So what kind of support they're looking for, whether it is in terms of abstract formatting, table style formatting. So it does not mean that you have to get your entire paper edited through these services. To publish process and surviving peer review. It's when it comes to the peer review process itself, one thing that we see very, very often is that how discouraging the process can be for so many researchers, having to go through that process over and over again. But the point to remember is that the very fact that you've been asked to review is good news. It means that you're in the publishing process. No publisher or an editor is going to spend time processing a paper they're not interested in. But there are some points that you need to keep in mind to ensure that this process works smoothly for you. So, like I mentioned, the request for revision is good news. It means now you are in the publishing cycle. Each paper is revised at least once. And it's very important that, these are all professional comments. And how do you tackle them? It becomes a very important aspect of this process. For instance, within South Asia, we see certain behaviors which a lot of editors have pointed out when it comes to international journals. It is not acknowledging the suggestions, not getting back with the revised document in time, and very common, more common than the most common error or mistake that researchers make is, especially in South Asia, they do test if they disagree with something. And this actually goes against researchers themselves. Because when there are, you have to keep in mind that the reviewer is also reading your paper for the, maybe they did not understand the concept, or maybe you haven't explained the concept very well. So in either case, what happens is, if you feel that the reviewer's comments are not okay, you do not agree with that comment that you received, it is very important to mention that and explain to the editor why you do not agree to the comment, which gives you a chance to either revisit the section and see whether that section actually needs to be reworded so it can lead to better reading experience or better understanding. But many authors, what they disagree with the reviewer, they make the changes thinking that your paper might get rejected. And they continue to go through that process over and over again till the paper focus and the paper gets rejected in the end after all the time and trouble. Which is why as expert of your paper, it becomes very important for you to decide whether you agree with all comments. If you don't, to speak up for it. Then clarify any doubts if you have regarding the questions. Consult with your colleagues or co-authors when it comes to the queries that you have received. You want to make sure that you have understood the questions correctly so you can address it correctly. Meet the revision deadline. And finally, attach a cover letter which identifies point by point revision has been met. If not, why not? This makes the editor's job much easier because they are able to go through the paper very, very quickly and make a decision of a final yes or yes, and then process it. So it's very important to attach a covering letter. I will not spend much time on public discussion discussing publication ethics because I think this has become a lot clearer in the more recent times. So the very basic thing is always seek agreement between authors, disclose any conflict of interest if it exists, and do remember that authors and editors are supported by Committee on Publication Ethics. So if you feel your paper has, your research has leaked or there's some kind of malpractice, always reach out to your editors and your publisher to bring up these issues. Do not one journal at a time. Do not self-plagiarize, and make sure you have clear permissions to publish interviews and case studies. When it comes to see cases now that people are aware of the various softwares and what we say is unintentional plagiarism, those cases are also come down a lot. But those happen at the same time. But we from our end as publishers, global publishers, all of us use Authenticate as a software to catch cases of plagiarism. When it comes to copyright, make sure that all your permissions are in place, because without permission being clear, we cannot publish a specific content. And coming to dissemination and promotion of your research, there are a few steps that you to make sure that work is being promoted effectively, because your publishers can take your research to far parts of the globe, but your biggest set of readers are those who are around you, your own people you're connected with. So before publication itself, develop an online presence and start building a community, start building your contact base. Use Twitter, LinkedIn, all the social medias to your advantage. Create a website or a blog. This is again very popular still. Creating a blog which has your picture, which talks about your research interests, what kind of publications you've had, those kind of information that you can share at the end of your email IDs also, to ensure that people know more and more about you and what kind of research you do or you're interested in collaborating for. Volunteer to get to know what are the latest kind of articles that are coming to improve your own writing abilities. And time restrictions are there, so I cannot go further, but how to register for ORCID ID if you don't have it, and register for Kudos. Kudos is a platform that helps you promote your work. Downloads are shown, it's shown to increase downloads by 23% with a few minutes of work. And both of these are multi-publisher platforms. So you're not limited or restricted because of where you published your paper. So please do explore both these options if you're not familiar with them. At the time of publication itself, spread the word effectively within your community. Let people know that your paper has been accepted and will be coming soon. If you have a PR, if you have a press office, let them know, check with them how they can spread the word for you or get the, let people know about your upcoming publication. Have PR teams who can help you with the campaign or create successful marketing messages. Finally, contact those who you have cited. A brief note thanking them for their contribution, mentioning which papers came in handy is a great way to not only let them know about your publication, but they'll be very happy to promote a paper where their paper has made a contribution. And after publication, look for, it's an opportunity to talk about what your paper has been, to collaborate with others, to create these opportunities for the next papers to come. So your social media network, I think when it comes to researchers in South Asia, we don't use it enough. In West, Twitter is used very heavily. In India, we've seen a preference for LinkedIn, for etc. LinkedIn for the same. So please see which one suits you best, and if possible, say what are the best ways to promote your articles on these platforms. So I think I'm already come to an end of my time. So I'm going to end it here with a quick note that any questions that you may have, you can contact me directly, and I'll be very happy to help you there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for the informative session on the publishing paper in Emerald. Actually, your session has given us an in-depth knowledge from writing a paper to publishing an indexing journal. Okay, and this is the time for question and answer. Are there any questions? Since we are not having any questions, thank you very much, ma'am, for your contribution towards this conference, Iccm 2021. And thank you for being a partner, academic partner from Emerald Publishing. And thank you. And now I kindly call upon the Secretary of Iccm 2021, Mrs. Sasila Balagobi, Senior Lecturer from Department of Financial Management, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all. The smallest act of kindness is worth more than the grandest intention. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks on the special occasions of the 6th International Conference on Contemporary Management of Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce, University of Jaffna for 2021. The theme of conference of this year is Unique One, that issues and challenges of sustainable development, fostering resolutions towards economic resilience to address the current issues on COVID-19 pandemic situation. Mainly it focuses on endorsing the research and development by discovering the knowledge and productive thoughts towards regional as well as national development. This conference provides a platform in Sri Lanka for the local and international researchers and academics to disseminate their research findings to the world and to emerge a global alliance to enhance the quality of international conference. First of all, it's my great pleasure to thank our Chairman of University Grant Commission, Senior Professor Sampath Amaradunga, for his virtual presence and inspirational speech. I place on record our deep sense of gratitude to our Vice Chancellor, Professor Sri Satkunaraja. We are really thankful to you for being with us today, for your valuable support and continuous guidance in arranging the conference. Your presence has added grandeur to today's function. We would like to extend our sincere thanks to our acting Vice Chancellor, Professor P. Ravirajan, who highlighted the prominence of this conference. I wish to extend my profound gratitude and heartfelt thanks to our Dean, Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce, Professor B. Nimeladasan, for his unwavering guidance and support in making this event a successful one. Our sincere thanks go to Rector Vaunia Campus, former Vice Chancellors, Deans of the Faculties, Council members, Acting Librarian, Registrar, Bursar, and Work Engineer for their present and continuous support. It's my pleasure to thank former Deans of our Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce for their guidance and continuous encouragement. Whilst I would like to express huge appreciation to retired senior academics of the Faculty of Management Studies and Commerce for their constant support and assistance. Many thanks go to co-chairs, heads of the departments for their constant assistance and guidance that radiated sources of energy within us. The ICCM 2021 has become truly outstanding with the participation of internationally recognized legends, Professor I.M. Pandey, Financial Management, Professor A. Parasuram, Marketing, and Professor Gary Dessler, Human Resource Management, and with keynote addresses delivered by them in our conference. ICCM 2021 owes its sincere gratitude to the keynote speakers who contribute to the success of this event. Panel discussion provide the fruitful insight on the theme. We are very much grateful to the moderator, Professor Opatha, Senior Professor, Human Resource Management, University of Sri Jeevatnapura, and the prominent panelist, Professor Samandhi Seniratna, Senior Professor in Accounting, University of Sri Jeevatnapura, Professor Pavitra Kailasabadi, Professor in Human Resource Management, University of Colombo, Dr. Dinuka Vijayadunga, Senior Lecturer in Marketing, University of Colombo, and Dr. Nalaga Vikramasinghe, Senior Lecturer in Commerce and Financial Management, University of Kelaniya, for their immense contribution. The members of editorial board, panel of reviewers, advisory committee members, chairperson, and coordinators of their continuous support in the sessions, and further representative of the various committees who helped in the numerous ways to make ICCM 2021 as a grand success one. Words are not enough to thank their constant support to shape conference. Whilst I thank all other distinguished delegates who have accepted our invitation and given their valuable time. Your participation, I am sure, will add depth to the content and deliberation. Thank you for your presence. We are very much thankful to the senior lecturers, and supportive staff who always stand by us and motivate us. I am also thankful to the conference key person, to the convener for his incredible effort and continuous encouragement in organizing the ICCM 2021. I would like to take the opportunity to thank to the organizing committee and the various committees of ICCM for their tireless work and commitment in organizing the conference even during the COVID-19 pandemic situation. Whilst our thanks go to the Emerald Partner and Ms. Sangeeta Menon, Publishing Relationship Manager, Emerald. We express our grateful thanks to our sponsors, Mr. Sivanyanam and Bank of Sloan, People's Bank, National Savings Bank, Nadaraja Kajanandan, New Maithili Jewelers, ESBN Kamala Duban, and Dayandiga Gunaratnam, the director, SV Murugesu Private Limited, whose hearted support has made this conference a reality. I am also very much thankful to those who have participated in the program of Welcome Dance, telecasting teams, and other participants for making this event as a memorable one. We would like to express our special thanks to our technical assistants, not only for the special thanks to team, but also for their support. I also wish to all thanks who have directly and indirectly contributed to make the international conference a reality. An event of this dimension cannot happen overnight. The wheels start rolling months in advance. We have been fortunate enough to be backed by the team of very motivated and dedicated committees and volunteers. I cannot thank everyone enough for the involvement they have shown and willingness they have expressed to take on the completion of this task beyond their comfort zone. Finally, I would like to congratulate all the scholars, researchers, and presenters for their participation in the international conference, which is held virtually due to the prevailing COVID-19 situations. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on this special occasion. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the first day of the conference. Thank you for your presence, patience, and participation. We would like to see you all at the technical session tomorrow. Have a great evening. God bless.